We are used to seeing medieval castles in movies, majestic, romantic, full of knights and beautiful ladies. We are shown spacious halls, blazing fireplaces, and luxurious four-poster beds. But this beautiful picture is just an illusion, hiding the harsh and cold reality. In fact, a castle was not a palace, but a military fortress built of cold stone. At night, the temperature inside its walls was almost the same as outside, turning sleep into a daily struggle for survival. This is a story about how people resisted the freezing cold using ingenuity that seems astonishing to us today. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn why the most luxurious bed in the castle was not an object of comfort, but rather a personal refuge, and how ordinary straw saved more lives than the thickest blankets. What if I told you that everything you believed about royal bedrooms was untrue? Forget the scenes from movies where every member of a noble family has their own private quarters. In a medieval castle, privacy was an unaffordable luxury available only to a select few. Most of the castle's inhabitants, from simple servants to knights, slept in one large common hall. It was the warmest and safest place in the entire fortress, where a fire was constantly kept burning in the hearth. People lay down on benches, chests, or directly on the floor, using their cloaks as blankets. Even the lord and his family did not always have a separate bedroom as we understand it. Often their bed was in the main hall, separated from the rest only by a screen or curtain. This ensured safety, as the ruler was always under the supervision of his loyal guards. The concept of a bedroom or solar did exist, but it was a multifunctional room. During the day, the lord received visitors here, worked with documents, and dined with a small circle of people. Only at night did this room become a place to sleep, often for the whole family at once. The idea that sleep is an intimate and private process was completely foreign to medieval thinking. People were born, lived, and slept in a community, and this was the norm. Solitude, on the contrary, was considered dangerous and strange. The main principle of organizing overnight accommodation was not privacy, but hierarchy. The higher your status, the closer to the fire and further from the drafts you slept. The most insignificant servants huddled near the cold walls and doors. Therefore, the first task when preparing for bed in a castle was not to find your room, but to take the best place in the common area. It was a quiet but daily struggle for warmth and minimal comfort. Your position in society determined how cold your night would be. The lack of personal space also meant the absence of personal belongings in the sense we are accustomed to. Everything of value was kept in chests, which often served as both seats and beds. The security of property was ensured not by locks on the doors, but by the constant presence of other people. This communal living was not a sign of poverty, but a way of life dictated by harsh realities. The warmth of human bodies was as important a source of heat as the fire in the fireplace. Together, it was warmer, safer, and calmer. It's interesting to see how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world. Where are you from? How did you imagine a medieval bedroom before watching this video? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Are you ready to learn the shocking truth about the main source of heat in a medieval castle? The majestic stone fireplace in the Great Hall was always the center of life in the castle, a place where people gathered to warm up and eat together. But its actual heating efficiency was depressingly low by modern standards of heating technology. The fireplace was more a status symbol and source of light than an effective heater. Its impressive appearance concealed a thermodynamic disaster inside. The main fundamental problem was the primitive design of early medieval fireplaces, which lacked an understanding of physics. They had an excessively wide and straight chimney without any narrowings, which created an excessively powerful air draft. As a result of this imbalance, the vast majority of the hot air from the flames immediately escaped outside through the chimney without having time to heat the room. The draft was too good for removing smoke, but disastrously bad for retaining heat, a conflict of goals without compromise. The efficiency of such an open fireplace was a mere 10 to 15% of the fuel burned, which means that up to 85 or 90% of the precious heat from the burning wood was simply lost to the atmosphere. In order to somehow heat the huge stone hall with high ceilings, it was necessary to burn an incredible, colossal amount of wood every day, tons per season. The forest around the castle was as strategic a resource for survival as iron for weapons or stone for construction. Its depletion was a disaster. Moreover, the fireplace was a constant source of painful drafts in the hall. Through the wide chimney, powerful drafts continuously sucked streams of icy air from the windows and countless cracks in the stone walls into the room to compensate. Near the blazing fire itself, a meter away, it was unbearably hot, burning the face. But a few meters away, a cold, piercing wind blew across the floor, freezing the back. The temperature gradient was extreme, from heat to cold in a few steps, creating discomfort instead of comfort. Another serious chronic problem was the acrid smoke, which did not always go up the chimney as intended. Due to the imperfect design of the chimney and the changeable windy weather outside, the large halls were often filled with suffocating smog. The walls and high ceilings quickly became covered with a thick, sticky layer of black, greasy soot and carbon, requiring constant cleaning. The soot was not only an aesthetic problem, but also evidence of inefficiency. Every particle of soot was unburned fuel, lost energy. Not only scarce wood was used as fuel, but also peat from swamps, which produced a lot of thick smoke and a specific unpleasant odor when burned. Breathing such polluted air was not only extremely unpleasant for the sense of smell, but also objectively harmful to lung health. Chronic respiratory and lung diseases were common among castle dwellers. The price of warmth was high for their health. Low-ranking servants responsible for maintaining the fire in the fireplace worked exhausting shifts around the clock. The coalman or stoker had to keep a constant watch to ensure that the flames did not go out on cold nights, risking carbon monoxide poisoning and smoke inhalation. It was physically demanding and life-threatening work on which the life and comfort of the entire castle depended. Falling asleep on duty could lead to tragedy. An extinguished fire meant people would freeze until morning. Despite all its obvious shortcomings in terms of efficiency, the fireplace remained the only truly powerful source of concentrated heat in the castle. Its impressive size and luxurious stone finish emphasized the high status and wealth of the castle's owner to guests. The richer and more influential the lord was, the larger, more luxurious, and more artfully decorated the fireplace in his main hall was. A demonstration of power through architecture and fire. People instinctively understood from experience that heat from an open fire spreads mainly through direct radiation rather than convection. Therefore, all the wooden benches and massive chairs in the hall were strategically placed facing the fireplace in a semicircle at arm's length. People literally absorbed the radiant heat with the front of their bodies before dispersing to their cold, dark corners of the castle for the night, charging themselves with warmth like batteries before going out into the cold. But if the fireplace in the hall was so ineffective for heating, what secret method did the castle's inhabitants use to warm their beds before going to sleep? In the next fascinating chapter, we will reveal an ancient secret that has been carefully passed down from generation to generation as survival knowledge. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the medieval bedroom. The most famous piece of medieval furniture, the four-poster bed, was not invented for beauty. It was an ingenious engineering solution, a veritable fortress for sleeping inside a cold stone fortress. The main element of this design was thick, heavy curtains that hung on all four sides. They were most often made of wool or other thick material. At night, these curtains were drawn tightly, creating a small enclosed space. Inside this fabric room, the temperature was several degrees higher than in the rest of the room. The heat from the breath and bodies of the sleeping people did not dissipate but accumulated under the canopy. It was a simple but incredibly effective way to preserve precious warmth. In addition, the curtains protected against drafts, which were a real curse in castle chambers. Even if an icy wind blew through the room, it was relatively calm and cozy inside the bed. This helped to avoid colds and other illnesses. The bed itself was a massive wooden structure raised high above the floor. This also had a practical purpose. The coldest air always accumulates at the bottom, near the stone floor. The higher you slept, the warmer it was. The base of the bed was not a solid platform, but a weave of strong ropes or leather straps. This mesh was elastic and allowed the mattress to breathe. Periodically, the ropes had to be tightened with a special wrench so that the base did not sag. For the most distinguished individuals, a wooden roof or canopy was made above the bed. It protected sleepers from condensation that could fall from the cold stone ceiling. Sometimes this roof was covered with fabric for additional insulation. Such a bed was incredibly expensive and was considered the main asset in the family. It was passed down from generation to generation, mentioned in wills along with land and titles. Often it was the only piece of real furniture in the room. Owning such a bed was a symbol of high status. If a lord went on a journey or a military campaign, he often took his collapsible bed with him. Sleeping in comfort was a privilege that no one wanted to give up. Thus, the bed was not just a place to sleep, but a complex device for survival. Every element of it, from the high legs to the heavy curtains, was designed to combat the cold and drafts. It was a personal, warm, and safe cave in the icy world of the castle. Guess what was objectively more important for survival on a cold night? A thick blanket or warm clothing on the body? Contrary to popular modern opinion and belief, people in the Middle Ages almost never slept completely naked under a blanket.
But even here,
warm sleepwear was an essential part of the nighttime ritual of preparation, another important line of defense against the penetrating cold. There was no place for nudity in a cold castle. Every layer of fabric on the body was a barrier between life and death from hypothermia at night. The basis of the nighttime sleepwear was a long undergarment reaching to the knees or ankles, or a camisa in Latin. It was handmade from coarse linen or, less commonly and more cheaply, from homespun hemp fibers. This simple shirt was universal. It was worn without distinction by men and women of all ages, both during the day under clothing and at night in bed as the only item of clothing. Changing underwear was rare. One shirt served around the clock until it was worn out and full of holes. Linen was the ideal affordable material for underwear due to its properties. It absorbed sweat and moisture from the body well, was durable enough for washing, and was relatively hygienic by the standards of an era without chemicals. Sleeping in the same shirt that had been worn all day was perfectly normal and did not raise any questions. The concept of fresh underwear for sleeping simply did not exist. Hygiene was a luxury, not the norm. Shirts were changed once a week at best, or even less often. An essential and indispensable element of everyone's nighttime wardrobe was a sleeping cap. Through an uncovered head with its rich blood supply, a person loses up to 30% of their body heat, so a woolen or linen cap was crucial in helping to keep it inside. In addition, it provided extra protection from drafts on the head and prevented long hair from getting tangled and dirty on the straw mattress. The cap was not a fashion statement, but a necessity. Sleeping with an uncovered head was considered reckless and a sure way to catch a cold. On particularly cold winter nights, people wore extra layers of clothing over their undergarments to increase insulation. These could be woolen stockings up to the thigh, underwear, or even woolen outerwear worn directly in bed. The principle of layering worked effectively both during the day to protect against the cold and at night under the covers. The more layers, the warmer it was, with each layer adding air pockets for insulation. For the wealthiest aristocrats, there were special luxurious nightgowns, similar to long robes or cloaks. They were sewn from expensive imported fabrics, sometimes lined with ermine or squirrel fur for warmth. This was not only practical for warmth, but also demonstratively emphasized the high status and wealth of the owner, even in bed. Luxury did not end with the setting of the sun. Nightwear was a marker of class just as much as daytime clothing. The poor slept in rags, the rich in silk. Blankets, of course, were also actively used for covering, but they were completely different from modern lightweight ones. Most often, they were heavy, massive covers made of coarse, unwashed wool, or quilted blankets stuffed with sheep's wool or flax shivs. Goose-down duvets were extremely rare, and a luxury available only to kings. Down was expensive, and geese were scarce. The weight of the duvet was an advantage. its heaviness pressed down and warmed better than lightness. People also used their daytime cloaks and outer garments as extra blankets for warmth. Travelers or warriors on campaign often slept directly on the ground, simply wrapped in their thick woolen cloaks without a bed. It universally protected them from the cold and wind during the day and on the ground at night. Versatility was the key to survival with a minimum of belongings. The cloak was a blanket, a bedding, and clothing all at once. The Swiss Army knife of medieval life. The value of warm clothing and bedding was enormous, both materially and symbolically. In the wills of noble ladies, specific items such as the best woolen blanket or the fur bedspread were often specifically mentioned for transfer to their heirs. These expensive items cost a fortune and served several generations of the family with care, being passed down as heirlooms. A blanket could be a family treasure, passed from mother to daughter, an investment in warmth for decades. But how could clothing and blankets alone really protect against the icy chill of thick stone castle walls in winter? In the next chapter, you'll learn about additional clever sources of heat and methods that were ingeniously used in the Middle Ages to survive the night. Even the warmest clothes in a bed with a canopy could not save you from the icy cold of the sheets. Lying down in a damp, cold bed was not only unpleasant, but also dangerous to your health. Therefore, one of the main tasks of the servants was to prepare and warm their masters' beds in advance. For this purpose, they used a special device known as a bed warmer. It was a metal container with a lid similar to a frying pan with a very long handle. Hot coals from the fireplace were placed inside this container. The servant would take this device by its long handle and carefully run it between the sheets and blankets. The hot metal transferred its heat to the bedding, making it warm and dry. This was a real luxury, available only to the wealthiest inhabitants of the castle. Using such a device required great care. A single spark falling from the container could instantly ignite a straw mattress and cause a fire. In addition, there was a risk of carbon monoxide poisoning in the enclosed space of the bed under the canopy. A simpler and safer method was to use heated stones or bricks. They were heated in the hearth and then tightly wrapped in several layers of fabric. These improvised heaters were placed at the feet or under the back. The stones retained heat for a long time and released it gradually, warming the sleeper for several hours. This method was available not only to the nobility, but also to ordinary people. The main thing was to have access to fire and suitable stones that did not crack when heated. Some wealthy households used special ceramic vessels filled with hot water. These were the direct ancestors of the modern rubber hot water bottle. However, ceramics were fragile, and such items were expensive. The process of preparing the bed was a whole ritual, demonstrating care and status. The more noble a person was, the more effort was made to ensure that their sleep was warm. For ordinary soldiers or servants, the limit of their dreams was simply to sleep closer to the fire. Having a warm bed was not just a matter of comfort. In conditions of constant dampness and cold, it was an essential measure for preventing rheumatism, colds, and other diseases. A well-heated bed helped to maintain health and combat readiness. These simple devices show how inventive people were in their fight against the cold. They used all available means to create at least a small island of warmth in their icy dwellings. Today we take central heating for granted, but for them it would have been a real miracle. Are you ready for the shocking truth about who medieval lords and ladies actually slept with in their beds? The modern concept of personal space and a private marital bedroom for two was completely foreign to the medieval world and mentality. Sleeping together with several people at the same time in one large bed was the absolute norm for all social classes without exception, from peasants to kings. Privacy was a modern invention that did not exist in the collective society of the Middle Ages. The main practical reason for sleeping together was the constant struggle for precious warmth in winter. Several human bodies in one bed generated significantly more useful heat than one isolated body. It was the simplest, most accessible, and free way to keep warm on cold nights without additional resources. Bodies were living hot water bottles that worked automatically. Collective thermoregulation was more effective than individual thermoregulation, as everyone warmed their neighbor. The entire extended family, including parents and several children of different ages, often slept together in one large bed without separation. This was the norm even in noble, wealthy families, with large castles and many rooms. Honored guests who came to the castle from afar could also count on a place in the bed of the hosts themselves as a sign of special respect and hospitality. To refuse would be an insult. Sharing a bed was the highest honor offered to a guest, a demonstration of trust and closeness. Numerous low-ranking servants slept crowded together on straw mattresses or simply on the cold stone floor in the rooms where they worked during the day, such as the kitchen or hall. The kitchen, with its constantly working stoves, was often one of the warmest and most desirable places in the entire castle on a cold night. Cooks, dishwashers, and other kitchen staff would sleep huddled together on the floor by the hearth, a privileged place compared to the cold corridors. Even the personal servants of high-ranking nobles slept in the same room as their masters for immediate access. A noble lady's chambermaid or a knight's squire often slept on a small mattress or straw at the foot of their master's bed in the same bedroom. This was done both for the convenience of immediate summons at night and for the physical safety of their masters from assassination attempts. The servant was a living alarm system, always on guard even in sleep. Sleeping together provided not only warmth for comfort, but also collective protection from danger. In turbulent times of civil strife, it was much safer to sleep surrounded by other people than alone. A sudden night attack on the castle or the secret infiltration of an enemy assassin into the chambers was less likely and less successful if there were several people awake or easily awakened in the room. Safety in numbers. Many eyes and ears guarded better than one sleeping person could protect themselves. The rules of conduct in a shared bed were strictly regulated by etiquette and custom. There were even special written treatises on etiquette, describing in detail how to behave properly when sleeping with people of different social status. For example, it was considered extremely rude to toss and turn at night or jostle your neighbor with your elbows, as this was seen as discourteous and disrespectful. Sleeping together required self-discipline and respect for other people's space in cramped conditions. At the same time, the concepts of intimacy and shame were completely different from what they are today. From early childhood, people were accustomed to sleeping in the presence of others, and this did not cause embarrassment or discomfort. It was the norm. The division between private and public space was much more blurred and vague than it is today in our individualistic society. Collectivism was the natural state of affairs. The body was not a secret to be hidden from others. Everyone saw each other, and this was not considered reprehensible. This ancient tradition of sleeping together began to gradually fade into the past only in the late Middle Ages of the 15th century and during the Renaissance, with the appearance of more separate rooms and dividing corridors in castles. Gradually, the nobility began to actively seek solitude and privacy as a new value, and the bedroom began to take on its modern form as an individual space for one or a couple. Privacy became a luxury available to the rich, and then the norm for everyone. Sleeping together effectively solved the problem of cold with collective warmth. But how exactly did they cope with the harshness of their primitive beds for comfort? In the next chapter, you will learn what medieval mattresses and bedding were actually made of. The comfort of a medieval bed depended directly on the quality of its filling and materials. The contents of a mattress, or futon in Old Russian, were a clear and visible indicator of the social status and wealth of its owner for everyone. For the vast majority of the castle's inhabitants, servants and soldiers, sleep was spent on the simplest and most affordable cheap materials without any frills. The softness of the bed was a privilege, not a right. The lower the status, the harder a person slept on their bedding. The most common and cheapest filling for the mattresses of the poor was ordinary straw from the fields after the harvest. A long bag made of coarse burlap or canvas was tightly stuffed with fresh cereal straw, resulting in a so-called palliasse or straw mattress. Such a mattress was hard and uncomfortable, but still much better than sleeping on a bare cold stone floor. Straw was free and available to everyone. Agricultural waste became bedding for the majority of the population. The straw in the mattress had to be changed regularly every few months, as it quickly became compacted under the weight of the body, crumbled into dust, and absorbed moisture from sweat. In addition, old straw inevitably attracted various parasites and insects, fleas and bedbugs. A fresh straw mattress with a pleasant smell was a sign of the hostess's cleanliness and care for the house. Old, smelly straw was a sign of poverty and neglect. Mattresses stuffed with soft hay from grasses or dry tree leaves were considered a more comfortable and prestigious option. These natural materials were noticeably softer than stiff cereal straw and better retained precious body heat due to their structure. Sometimes dry aromatic herbs such as lavender, mint, or wormwood were added to the filling for a pleasant aroma and to effectively repel insect parasites. The aroma was not a luxury, but a practicality. The herbs repelled pests naturally without chemicals. For the more affluent middle class, mattresses were stuffed with horsehair from tails and manes, sheep's wool, or even cotton batting from the East. These expensive materials were resilient, durable, and provided a completely different, higher level of comfort for the body. Wool also kept you warm in winter and did not clump together over the years. An investment in comfort for decades, paying off in quality sleep and back health. The height of luxury and a demonstration of wealth was considered to be a down or feather mattress, known as a feather bed or down jacket. Lightweight and incredibly soft, such feather beds were incredibly warm and comfortable to sleep on, like a cloud. However, only the most distinguished aristocrats and wealthy feudal lords of the upper class could afford them. Goose and swan down was a rare and expensive material that required labor to collect. A feather bed cost a fortune and was passed down as a family treasure. Often, the beds of the nobility were complex, multi-layered structures designed for maximum comfort. A hard straw mattress was placed on the rope base of the bed as a base layer of insulation from the cold. On top of this, a softer and more expensive down feather bed was placed for comfort. A combination of practicality and luxury. The two layers worked together. The bottom insulated from the cold, while the top provided softness and warmth. Caring for such expensive bedding was a laborious and constant process for the servants. Mattresses and feather beds had to be taken out into the sun several times a year for thorough drying and airing to remove moisture and odors. They were also vigorously beaten with special wooden sticks to prevent the filling from clumping and to keep it even and fluffy. Without care, even an expensive feather bed would turn into a lumpy, uncomfortable mattress within months. For ordinary soldiers in the castle garrison, even a straw mattress was an unaffordable luxury. They often slept directly on the cold stone floor of the barracks, with only an armful of straw or their woolen cloak for minimal insulation. During campaigns, any relatively flat and dry surface of the ground, a meadow, a field, a forest, served as a bed. Comfort was for peacetime. War required the bare minimum. Survival did not require softness, only a roof over one's head. Thus, the filling of a mattress was not simply a matter of personal convenience or comfort. It was a critical part of a complex thermal insulation system that helped to physically separate the sleeper's body from the cold bed base below. The thicker and higher quality the insulating layer of filling, the warmer and more comfortable the sleep and health. The mattress was a barrier between the body and the cold. Its thickness was measured not in comfort, but in degrees of heat retained. The main invisible enemy of comfortable sleep in a medieval castle was not so much the static cold of the walls as the constant piercing draft that blew everywhere. The thick stone walls had no internal insulation or warming, and the windows and doors were far from modern airtightness. Streams of icy air freely penetrated all rooms, creating a movement of cold that felt more acute than just low temperature. Static cold could be endured, but moving cold penetrated to the bone. The wind made the cold deadly dangerous, increasing the body's heat loss many times over. The windows in early medieval castles of the 10th and 12th centuries were simple, narrow openings in thick stone walls, or embrasures for defense. Glass was an incredibly expensive imported material and was used only in rich churches and cathedrals as a symbol of divine light. In the living quarters of castles, windows were simply covered with massive wooden shutters without glass. Light or heat, you could choose one or the other, but not both at the same time. These rough shutters did not fit well to the uneven stone frames of the openings, leaving large gaps around the perimeter measuring several centimeters. To at least somewhat reduce the piercing draft through the gaps, the openings were additionally covered from the inside with oiled fabric or thinly tanned leather for transparency. Such improvised windows let in a little dim light during the day for illumination, but provided little protection from the cold wind and no insulation from the cold at all. The choice was between light and cold or warmth and darkness. There was no compromise. The doors in the castle were also a constant source of strong, painful drafts around the perimeter. They were made of thick, solid oak planks, but they often dried out from time and humidity changes, forming gaps between the planks. The thick, heavy curtains, made of fabric or leather, which were always hung in front of doorways, were not decorative interior decorations at all, but a vital necessity for insulation. Each layer of fabric was a barrier to the wind. The more layers, the less drafts got inside. Various other methods of insulation were also used to actively combat drafts. The cold stone walls in the chambers of the nobility were hung with large, heavy tapestries, woven carpets with scenes. These expensive woven carpets created an air-insulating layer between the cold stone wall and the warm room, physically acting as textile insulation. Tapestry was not art on the wall, but functional insulation that happened to be beautiful. Beauty served practicality, not the other way around. The floors in castles were universally cold stone slabs or compacted earth, from which a piercing cold constantly rose. To insulate them and create insulation, the floor was generously sprinkled with a thick layer of straw or dry reeds from the marshes across the entire area. In winter, this insulating layer was made especially thick, tens of centimeters, for maximum protection of the feet. The floor turned into a soft carpet of organic material, which was warmer to walk on barefoot than bare stone. Various aromatic herbs, lavender, mint, rosemary, were specially added to this bedding on the floor for a pleasant aroma and primitive disinfection. However, it was not cleaned and changed as often as it should have been for hygiene reasons, once every few months at best. Over time, food scraps, bones, animal excrement, and other organic debris inevitably accumulated in it, attracting parasites. Hygiene was sacrificed for practicality. Better a dirty bedding than cold, clean stone underfoot. All the cracks and crevices found in stone walls and wooden floors were diligently filled with whatever materials were at hand. Moss from swamps, hemp tow, or a mixture of clay and straw were used as cement. This was a constant and endless task for the servants, as new cracks appeared due to shrinkage and thermal expansion of the materials. Filling the cracks was a Sisyphean task that never ended. The castle was constantly falling apart and requiring repairs. The strategic placement of furniture in the room also took into account the direction of prevailing drafts for protection. The bed was always deliberately placed against an interior warm wall, away from exterior windows and through doors. Sometimes wooden panels or curtains were even built around it, creating a small isolated room within a large one. The bed became a fortress within a fortress, a protected core in a cold space. This constant daily battle with drafts determined many aspects of castle life and daily routine. People instinctively sought out and memorized the most wind-protected places in the castle to rest. The ability to find and properly arrange such a warm corner was an important practical skill for survival in winter. Knowledge of the castle's microclimate was knowledge of survival. Where it was warmer, there was life. Going to bed in a medieval castle was not a spontaneous act, but a complex and important ritual. It involved many steps aimed at ensuring warmth and safety throughout the long night. This process required the efforts of a whole team of servants. As dusk fell, preparations for the rooms began. Servants went around the castle, closing all the wooden shutters on the windows tightly. This was the first and most important step in protecting against the night cold and drafts. Then heavy curtains were drawn across the doorways and tapestries hung on the walls. Every crack through which cold air could penetrate had to be closed. The castle was transformed into a fortress that was as airtight as possible. The main task was to keep the fires burning in the fireplaces and hearths. Large logs were thrown into the main fireplace in the great hall, which could smolder all night. The fire was also kept burning in the Lord's private chambers, if there was a fireplace there. The next step was to prepare the bed itself. Servants brought hot water bottles filled with coals or hot stones and carefully warmed the bed. They fluffed the duvets and pillows to make them more plump and warm. While the bed was being prepared, the owners of the castle performed their evening toilet. It was very simple and usually consisted of washing their faces and hands in a basin of water. The water for this often had to be heated over a fire. After that, the lord and lady changed into their night clothes. Servants helped them take off their heavy daytime clothes and put on linen shirts and nightcaps. Then they accompanied their masters to bed. Before going to bed, people always prayed. Religion played a huge role in the life of a medieval person. Prayer gave a sense of security against the dangers of the dark hours of the day. When the masters went to bed, the servants drew the curtains tightly. Personal servants went to sleep in their places at the foot of the bed. Guards took up their posts at the doors. Only after all these procedures were completed did the castle sink into relative silence. This complex ritual was repeated day after day. It was an integral part of the struggle for survival in the harsh conditions of medieval life. Night in the Middle Ages was not just a dark time of day, but a completely different world. Without electric lighting, the darkness was absolute and all-consuming. The only sources of light were the fire in the hearth, expensive wax candles, or cheaper tallow candles, which smoked and smelled bad. This impenetrable darkness also affected people's psychology. Night was considered a time of danger, both real and supernatural. People believed that evil spirits and other evil forces became active under the cover of darkness. That is why sleeping together in the presence of other people were so important. Loneliness at night caused fear. The sounds coming from the darkness, the creaking of floorboards, the howling of the wind, the cries of nightbird, stirred the imagination. Interestingly, the very concept of sleep was different. The modern concept of 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep was foreign to medieval people. Historians believe that so-called segmented or biphasic sleep was common at that time. People went to bed shortly after sunset and slept until about midnight. Then they woke up for an hour or two. This period of wakefulness was called the night watch. This time was not considered insomnia, but was a normal part of the night. People used it for prayer, reflection, reading by candlelight, or simply for quiet conversation with those sleeping nearby. After that, they went back to sleep and slept until dawn. This sleep pattern was natural in the absence of artificial lighting. It was dictated by the natural cycle of day and night. The long winter nights provided enough time for 2 periods of sleep. Dreams themselves were taken very seriously. It was believed that during sleep, the soul could travel or receive divine revelations. Dream interpretation was an important activity. The sharp boundary between sleep and wakefulness was blurred. People could doze off during the day, especially during the long winter months. Sleep was not a clearly defined period of rest, but a natural state into which a person fell as needed. Thus, the night in a medieval castle was filled not only with cold, but also with a special atmosphere. It was a time of fears, prayers, and unusual, intermittent sleep. The ability to adapt to these conditions was the key to survival. We can see that sleep in a medieval castle was far from the fairy tale images we have. It was a nightly struggle with cold, drafts, and darkness, requiring enormous ingenuity from people. Every element of daily life, from the design of the bed to clothing, was part of a complex system of survival. These harsh conditions shaped a completely different attitude towards sleep, comfort, and personal space. What seems uncomfortable to us today was the norm for them. They found warmth in each other's presence and safety within the walls of their stone fortress. The history of their daily life is a reminder of how far humanity has come in its pursuit of comfort. Simple things that we take for granted, a warm blanket, airtight windows, central heating, would have been a real miracle, the ultimate dream for people in the Middle Ages. Please suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. What else from the world of medieval survival interests you? Food, hygiene, medicine? Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new research into the mysteries of the past.